You know, one thing that a lot of people have said about real estate and what's going to happen in the future when home prices finally come down, I've even seen it a ton of times here in my own comment section here on the channel, is everybody says that, oh, when real estate prices come down, all the foreigners are going to come in and buy up all the real estate, or BlackRock and Blackstone are going to come in and buy it all up. Well, according to the latest data on the housing market, we have some information that proves that not to be true. And not only does it prove it not to be true, but it also proves that this recession that we are in or entering into, whatever phase of it you want to call it right now, is global. This is not just a USA problem. This is a global problem in 2024. And before I get into it, I'm walking through one of the houseboat communities here in Sausalito. I think this is just super cool. I love walking through the docks here and seeing all the different houseboats. I think it's super interesting, even though it's something I would never want to do myself. I would not be interested in living in a houseboat, but I think it's extremely cool to just see all of them and how different people live. Now, the data I was referring to here is the fact that we are now seeing international home buyer purchases here in the US drop to the lowest level on record since they've been keeping track back in 2009, guys. Between April of last year to March of 2024, international buyers only purchased 54,300 existing homes. That's it. That's hardly anything. It's a drop in the bucket when you consider that home sales are around 4 million homes sold when annualized. So that is just nothing. It's just a drop in the bucket. Not only is it a drop in the bucket, but it's also a 36% reduction from the amount of homes that foreigners purchased back in 2023. This equated to about $42 billion that they spent in this last year. And that's down also 21% from a year ago, which is kind of interesting considering that home prices are up, right? Everybody likes to point at, oh, look at, the Case-Shiller home price index is up. Not only did the purchase amounts fall, the amount of homes that purchased went down, but also dollar volume that they spent went down at a time when home prices are higher. Now, one thing to note is this data only counts existing home sales. It doesn't count any homes that were purchased that are new construction by foreign buyers, which, a lot of foreign buyers like to buy, especially in Miami. They buy like a lot of the new construction condos, which we'll talk about here in a minute. One reason that they're not buying as much is because of the strong dollar. It makes it harder for international buyers to come here and spend money because their currency is worth less than ours. And when they have to do a currency exchange on top of that, in order to convert their foreign currency into dollars, this makes it even tougher for them to come in and buy real estate here. Another thing that the entire world is facing is a recession, guys. A lot of economies across the world aren't doing that good. You even hear a lot of the political candidates, they continue to repeat the same catchphrase, which is that, oh, the US is doing better than all the other economies in the world. Well, okay, and things aren't even that good here, right? So imagine how bad it is in other places that are trying to keep up with us. So just like all other types of home sales here in the US, the only people who are still buying homes here that are foreigners are the richest of the rich, people that really have the money to be doing it right now, and they're not spending as much as they did before. But there is one exception, and that is in Miami, where I live. In fact, Florida in general still remains the top state throughout the entire country where foreigners like to buy US real estate. About 35% of those people are from Latin America, 27% are from China, which I'm surprised to hear that still, because we made it a lot harder in Florida for Chinese people to buy real estate in Florida over this past year. Here's something that people need to understand, which has always been the case in Miami, is that foreigners come to Miami and basically just the richest ones have the cash to purchase there. Because if you think about it, currencies in all these other countries, especially in South America, are almost worthless compared to the US dollars. They need to have a lot of their foreign currency to be able to purchase real estate in places like Miami. Okay, and they come and they buy brand new developments, the big condos and stuff that they build there that are brand new construction. That's what they buy with an average price point of around $1 million. And so that also proves what I said a minute ago. It's only the richest of the rich foreign buyers who are purchasing these condos in Miami. And it's something that has helped drive prices insanely high in Miami over the past couple of decades, but also it's part of the reason why Miami keeps catering to, building nothing but properties for rich people. Like literally every single time I show you guys a new development or you see a new house being built in Miami, it's multi-millions. Nothing anymore is being built for the average person. I mean nothing. Another thing I find interesting, according to the data, the foreign buyers in Miami, they like to buy the brand new construction condos for the average price point of $1 million, but a lot of them don't want to buy in the older buildings that have special assessments and are going through all of the work like we've been talking about here on the channel. They have special assessments, they have to do concrete restoration work to basically get the building up to par and make sure it's in good, livable condition. These special assessments are expensive. We've seen it go anywhere from, a couple $1,000s up to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the building, depending on the work that needs to be done, etc. But these people would still rather buy brand new units in a brand new development for more money than to spend less on a building that needs all this work. So that also goes to show you that not even foreigners want to buy in these old buildings that haven't been kept up well. And it's going to be very tough, I think, for people to unload these buildings that have been in distress for years now. They're exposed, guys. Like now, everybody knows what's going on, even foreigners. You're not going to be able to trick people from another country into buying your unit in a building that hasn't been maintained properly for the past 40 years. No one's going to fall for it. Another way that you know that it's only the richest of the rich foreign buyers who are purchasing U.S. real estate right now is because of all the hurdles that they have to go through. Like number one, they have to convert their currency into US dollars to be able to buy it, right? But they also need to be able to get a loan if they're getting financing, which also means putting down a higher down payment than people here have to do. It also means that it's much harder for them to get approved by HOAs because they don't have any credit history here in the US. They don't have any landlord or living history here. A lot of times they have to set up an LLC here in the US in order to be able to conduct business and in order to be able to buy these properties. They usually have to hire some kind of property manager to watch after the property for them. So there's a lot of extra expenses that these foreigners incur when buying property here in the US that people here really don't have to pay for. And literally half of the foreigners that come to the US and buy real estate pay cash. Clearly money isn't an issue for half of them. But there's a couple of trends that we can notice from everything we just talked about so far. Number one is that other countries are hurting. And if they weren't, then the foreign sales would still be strong here in the US, but they're not. Because I've heard other people say, well, globally, when you look at real estate prices all over the world, prices in the US are still a bargain when you look at places like Hong Kong and Paris and whatever, these really expensive markets across the world. But this is all happening at a time when inventory in the US is going up. Inventory on the US housing market is up about 30% year over year. So it's actually false to believe that once home prices come down and all the inventory comes back, that all the foreigners and all of the big banks and the big investors are going to rush in and buy everything, guys. It's not true, because if it were, then it would already be starting to happen right now. Now, sure, are they going to come in and buy some of that inventory once inventory gets back to pre-pandemic levels or higher and prices continue to drop? Of course they will. But, there's a lot of markets where that's already happening across the country. And I got a lot of flack on this channel for talking about a housing crash and talking about how, look, the home prices nationally are still going up year over year, even in 2024, and you were wrong. Well, I wasn't really wrong. Maybe on a national basis I was wrong, but not when it comes to local markets, because there are plenty of markets across the country where home prices are down substantially from where their peak prices were in 2022. Guys, take a look at this chart. I'm just going to roll it through here on the screen because there's so many of them, I can't even mention them all. And when you look at these price reductions and how much prices have come down since 2022 until now, some of them are in double-digit territories. We're talking like 22% price reductions for places like Greenwood, Missouri. You're talking a 24% price reduction from places like Natchez, Missouri. Even in places like New Orleans, Louisiana, you're talking a 13.5% loss from 2022 until now, guys. So literally in these markets, every single market that you see on this list has home prices going negative from where they were during the peak. And some of them have lost so much value that it's actually less valuable than it was in 2020 before the pandemic. I mean, look at all the way to the right on this chart. You can see markets, anything with a negative number there means that prices there are lower today than they were in March of 2020. Well, how is that possible? Because real estate only goes up, right? Well, apparently not in these dozens and dozens of cities across the country. And a lot of them might be in places you never heard of, but that doesn't matter. What matters is it's real data and it's happening to people. Is it happening to people in places like Miami, where I live? No. But it is happening in some big cities across the country, like in San Francisco, right across the bay here. You have plenty of people there that are selling real estate right now for less than what it was worth back in March of 2020. So go ask them about the housing market crash. You even have Lake Charles, Louisiana, guys, is now worth 8.8% less than it was in March of 2020. How was that even possible? It's possible because things get way overheated, people get way in over their heads, pay way too much for real estate, and the prices soar so far beyond what the locals can afford that it has no choice but to come back down to earth. And that's exactly what's happening in a ton of these markets. But listen, I'm also going to be the first one to say that this isn't happening everywhere. It's not like everywhere across the country is losing money right now and the home prices are going negative. Absolutely not. And when you look at this chart, it's basically the opposite of the previous one. It shows you markets across the country that are doing well still, that have gained a ton of value since March of 2020, and most of them are still higher than they were at the peak of the market in 2022. Some of them are negative, as you can see here. San Francisco is definitely one of them. But when you see Miami, where I live, the prices are still up 9% from where it peaked in 2022. But you have other areas on this list that are just now starting to show some decline, like Tampa, Florida, places like San Antonio, Texas, Sacramento, California. Those prices are starting to come down year over year now. But even on this list of the 50 metros that are kind of doing the best right now, you still have over a dozen of them that are starting to go negative. So even in the best markets, the biggest markets across the country, a couple dozen of them are starting to see trouble. You're starting to see prices come down. And I get it. I get everyone's complaint that it's not coming down fast enough, it's not coming down enough to really make a difference. Same thing with interest rates, same thing with rents. And I 100% agree, guys. I know it's not coming down fast enough, but you have to give it time. And some of these markets may never go down to where they were prior to 2020. Might never see pre-pandemic pricing in some of these markets, but it looks like in a lot of them, we might get close. Because another data point we have to show that this housing market is weakening up substantially right now are the price cuts, okay? About 25% of listings on the market right now have a price cut as of June. That's the highest amount of price cuts that we've seen on the US housing market since June of 2018, which was way before the pandemic. So if we're already seeing price cuts up to pre-pandemic levels, I think we are going to see prices come down or close to pre-pandemic pricing in a lot of markets, guys. It's not going to be everywhere, but even if it doesn't come down to pre-pandemic pricing, I'm pretty sure everyone would be happy with a 20% reduction in prices where they live. The foreign investors are not coming in to save the day like everybody said. BlackRock is not coming in to save the day like everybody said. So who's going to come in and buy these properties? Right now, it looks like the answer is no one, except for the richest of the rich here in the US and across the world. And guess what? The home builders are having a field day right now because it is now cheaper to buy a brand new house than an existing home in many parts across the country. In fact, it's about $7,100 cheaper to buy a brand new home today versus an existing home. So buying a brand new home has become almost a no-brainer for anybody who's in the market today, and that's going to end up hurting a lot of home sellers who still think that their floors are paved with gold. this is all great news for home buyers, guys. It's great news that things are heading in your direction. Does it mean that you're going to get the deal of a century today? No, unfortunately, it doesn't mean that. But it does mean that if you're on the lookout and you're patient, you might be able to find a much better deal than you were able to find even 1 or 2 years ago. I would still recommend probably waiting longer than that. That would be what I would do. But if you want to buy now or you need to buy now, then you're probably going to be in a better position than you were a couple of years ago with the amount of choices and with your negotiating power in the deal. And listen, technically this is still a seller's market. It's not a buyer's market yet, at least in a lot of areas. But we're talking nationwide here, it's still a seller's market because inventory levels are still only about 3.5 months of supply. 6 months supply is considered balanced. But even with it still being in a seller's market, because so few people can actually afford to buy a home, even though inventory is still in seller's market territory, that still gives buyers a tremendous amount of leverage, more than they had at the frenzy of the market, which I think is all good news for home buyers looking to buy today. And it's no surprise that the biggest price declines are in places like Florida and Texas that saw the biggest amount of surge in migration during the pandemic, and also we're seeing the largest surge in the cost of homeownership in these places when it comes to the property tax increases, when it comes to the homeowners insurance increases. It's gotten completely unaffordable for so many, even existing homeowners, and now you're seeing the sell-off. Now, speaking of existing homeowners, I want to talk to my Florida people here for a minute about Amendment 5 that's going to be on the ballot this November for the homestead tax break. Because when I first talked about this on the channel and I first read about it, like, wow, this sounds good, because you're going to get your homestead exemption increased based on the rate of inflation for that year, which sounds like a good thing, especially with all of the inflation we've had recently. But there's a couple of things about it that make it not as good as it sounded originally. Like, number one, you're not going to get the inflation increases from the past couple of years, which would be the most meaningful. But also, these inflation adjusted increases in your homestead exemption don't make nearly as much of a difference as I would hope that they would. In fact, the Florida Realtors sent over a chart with a breakdown to show you guys like what kind of a tax break you're going to be looking at if you have a property that's assessed at around $300,000 in an average Florida county. So even in this chart, you guys can see they're using a property assessed at $300,000, and they're showing the prior year's inflation rate being 8%, which is not even going to happen if this passes, because the official inflation rate for this year is probably only going to be in the 3s. So not going to make that big of a difference, right? And then they show you the school taxes, which are completely unaffected by this, which sucks because that's where you pay like a third or even half of your property taxes. But when you look at your total tax rate with the passage and without the passage of this amendment, the bill's literally only $20 cheaper, guys, with the passage of this amendment. And listen, I'm all in favor of saving money, and so I will probably vote yes for this, because any money saved is better than no money saved. But it's not making a huge difference like it made it sound like it was going to. Like, oh, you're going to be saving, thousands or at least hundreds of dollars per year on your property tax bill. No. And obviously, the higher your assessed value is, the more you have to save. But for the average Florida homeowner, most people probably have an assessed value around this amount, $350,000, $300,000, $400,000. So you're not going to be saving a ton of money. So should you vote for it? Probably. Is it going to save you a ton? No. But I guess any instance where the government is offering to lower your tax bill, even if it's just by a little bit, is better than nothing. And the other thing really is that this only helps us if inflation is high. If the official inflation numbers start going down, then this isn't going to help us at all, because you're not going to get that increased exemption amount because inflation isn't going up. And since we've already probably seen the worst of inflation, this isn't going to help as much as we might have thought it would have. Also, in case people didn't know what this is, now you know. It's going to save you a little bit of money on your property taxes, but if you're a renter, this doesn't affect you at all, unfortunately. It doesn't help you in any way. But if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.